you guys. So we started the monthly housing opportunities webinar last year. And what we wanted to do was keep everyone informed on the market. And it was changing so fast. And something that struck me a lot last year was that all these things that we think were unique to 2023 weren't really. Like the market always changes fast.
Yeah.
It's always fast paced. And so then we thought, well, we'll keep going with it because it probably benefits people to hear the latest stuff, stay in the loop. And in all honesty, with everyone on this call, we wanted to follow up with our pre-approved clients, our realtors, keep our buyers and community in the loop without being annoying and just calling and like nagging, like, hey, you ready now? You ready now? We wanted to be providing value and information and keeping them in the loop. So that was how the housing opportunities or opportunities in housing as it evolved started, really came to fruition last year. And we did it every month. And we stuck with it and we really liked it. We hope you guys are really liking it too, whether you're here live or catching the recording later. Our goal is to give you a quick 30 minutes, fill you in on the latest things we're seeing actually work. So basically taking the headlines and translating them down to what we're noticing really happening here in the Reno market. We did rename it though to Property Pursuits. Feel free to chime in the chat if you like that. If you don't like it, just don't chime in, just keep it to yourself. And we will not value your opinion on that because we really like it. So let's get started. Sandy's going to start things with a recap of 2023 because it should be like influencing what happened last year should be part of your strategy for this year.
Yeah, definitely. And we all know 2023 was a bit of a wild ride. Taylor Swift took over the internet and so did Barbie.
She took over the economy.
She did take over the economy in full force. Yes. And interesting, that had an interesting impact on short-term rentals for cities.
I just saw that from Bigger Pockets.
That she did tours in. So
like the Airbnbs and stuff.
Yeah.
Gosh,
she saved Airbnb single-handedly.
What does she? What doesn't she do?
Right. But then on top of that, we had a lot of global and even just national news and political turmoil. So that all had an impact on what happened with interest rates. But we're going to kind of focus on more of a local level and what happened in our market. So the big story of the year last year for real estate was interest rates. Interest rates hit a 23-year high over the year, which really put a damper on affordability and caused a lot of people to not be able to shop for homes anymore. It was really interesting. So the reason this all happened is because the Fed started their tough on inflation policy. As a recap, if we go back to 2020 and the pandemic,
hitting all the fun spots.
Oh, yes, this is a happy recap. Thanks for coming. So pandemics are historically inflationary because supply chains get messed up. So when we have supply chains that aren't functioning, we have not enough things for people to buy. This one was particularly inflationary because we had government stimulus and the Fed kept interest rates really low at historically low interest rates. On top of, they were buying a lot of mortgage bonds. All of this stimulated the economy and also the housing market. So this caused inflation to peak in February of 2022 at a 5.6 interest rate. So they started doing their Fed hikes. We saw 7 rate hikes in 2022 and 4 in 2023. As a reminder, the Fed funds rate, which is what they were hiking, is not the same as mortgage interest rates, though they do closely follow each other over the long term. So we saw mortgage rates peak, but what did that have to do with inventory, right? Because inventory is another huge impact on what's going on in our market and what's going on with your investment to buy real estate as an investment, right? A lot of people buy real estate for the gains, and that's why it's such a good asset class. Is it always goes up over time, and people can use their homes as an emergency fund in many cases or a retirement planning strategy. So inventory, that's the other piece of the puzzle. We had a very low inventory last year, and that was a function of the seller lock-in effect, which is because sellers, most of them, or homeowners, most of them refinanced in 2020 and 2021 to those historically low interest rates. So they had very little incentive to sell that home and upsize or downsize or get into a new home at the current interest rates that were higher. So we saw very low inventory and gridlock, but we did see a lot of buyers winning because some sellers had to move. They were getting divorced. They were relocating. They wanted to be by their kids,
We
something.
saw motivated sellers in 2023.
Yeah, we saw motivated sellers and we saw a lot of buyers really get smoking deals last year. One of the most popular loan programs was the temporary buy down. That one is amazing because the seller can pay for a lower interest rate in years 1 and 2. For most cases, there are variations on that program, but it can make your payment drastically lower than the regular payment that you would have gotten without that program. So we had a lot of that going on. We had a lot of first-time home buyers getting seller concessions. We saw investors buying houses. So the people who were buying were winning. So let's talk about appreciation.
Yay.
So the median home price in Reno right now, and it varies depending on how you pull the data, but we're looking at about a 525 purchase price. The median home price is different than appreciation. All that means is that half the homes sold above that price, half the homes sold below that price. So interestingly, the median sale price per square foot was up 3.7% from last year to $308. So we've seen pretty steady appreciation in our area.
I remember when we bought our house and the price per square foot was like pushing 200 and people were like scoffing. So it's crazy when because not being realtors, I don't really think in terms of price per square foot very
I
often.
could care less.
It's the only thing I think of
Like that doesn't make sense.
when I hear that is remembering them talking about it when we were buying our house.
And it was a lot.
The realtor kept comparing it to like the comps. Well, this was price per square foot. I wonder if they still do that. Do you guys still do that? Do you compare based on price per square foot? Más o menos.
Más o menos.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, go on.
No worries. Yeah. So it's interesting. We saw a little bit of a decline in home price at the beginning of the year, which kind of follows seasonal trends. We typically see a slower winter months. And then, I mean, people like to move in the summer when their kids can get into the school zone at the beginning of the year and when the weather's not as bad. So that kind of matched our seasonal trends. And then we saw it kind of uptick and stay really steady. So interestingly, that was one of the things people were most surprised about last year is how strong the economy was or the housing market was with 23-year high interest rates. So it just showed a lot of resiliency. And again, that's supply and demand. We have millennials aging into the market in full force. And I mean, a lot of them had to move back with their parents to save money for a down payment because they're aging into the market. They want to buy. And we just don't have enough houses for them. So
it's a huge flex though, for not just us in the industry, but people who did buy in 2020, 2021, or who like scoped out a deal last year, that this investment is an amazing asset class because regardless of interest rates hitting 8%, it persevered. And it was a lot less volatile than a lot of other asset classes. So I think looking at that median price gives me a lot of peace too, because I personally invest in real estate.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I mean, that's one thing I gave a presentation about earlier this year, but like when
Earlier this year?
oh yeah, okay. 5 minutes of just kidding, a year ago. Wow, it's 2024, guys. Yeah, it's like, you know, when you're looking to invest in real estate, you do a lot of market research on what that market's doing. And our market is growing. We have EDON bringing good high paying jobs here, tech jobs, warehouse manufacturing. We're so diversified and our economy is just growing. I mean, I've heard it's called the next Silicon Valley multiple times. So yeah, just, you know, when you're thinking about real estate as an investment, you think about location, location, location. And I think Reno is an excellent location.
Place to be. It's a
Yeah.
place to buy.
You said too, like real estate always goes up in value. And I don't know if anyone heard that and was like, well, did she mean to say that? Because yeah, you did. You did mean to say that. Over time, I gotta use the right mouse. It always goes up. So moving directly from a 2020, oh, were you done?
Yeah. You had great timing. Oh, we have a chat question.
What's the chat question?
Do you anticipate the supply to increase this year?
Well, okay, so I'll talk about that in this forecast. If I forget, then somebody remind me. But I'm going to get to why that could happen. I think in 2024, as we look at this year, and you guys tell me if you agree, but I think that January and February will be the best times to get a deal because a lot of people are still in their holiday hangover. So they're not paying attention to the fact that interest rates have come down. And if they did get priced out in 2023, they might be butthurt. And so they'll wait a little to jump back in. And the media will, of course, have a lag on saying that interest rates have come down so much. And this is how it affects your buying power. So I think before everybody gets the memo, we'll have a bit of an opportunity where you can get a deal on a house. But I think we'll still have an inventory problem through that. As sellers start to realize that they can sell, because for a seller to become a seller, they have to be a buyer. They have to qualify for a mortgage and be able to accomplish their goals in downsizing, upsizing, or relocating. So sellers will start to get that memo and there'll be a little bit more inventory after this window, which is why it's kind of bittersweet, because you have a good opportunity to buy right now, but you still have to jump on the inventory as soon as you see it because there's not a ton.
Yeah.
Then I think with interest rate cuts, and I was talking to my friend Craig, who's a financial advisor, and I was like, what do you think is going to happen this year? Because he's also personally trying to refinance his loan. So he's very invested in like timing this. But he said, well, I don't think we see the rate cuts as early as everyone's saying. The Fed futures market, it's building it in for March. Is that what the update said yesterday?
I
Yeah.
believe so.
It's already built in a little bit.
So the Fed futures market has already 100% reacted to a rate cut happening as early as March. And that's something to keep in mind, that the 3 rate cuts that were announced and interest rates improved over 100 basis points on the news, that was the market building in those rate cuts. You don't have to wait for those rate cuts to happen now to take advantage. We saw the benefit right away. So what I'm worried about is that people will be waiting for those rate cuts and then thinking that there's going to be a huge movement in bonds.
Mhm.
There could be movement based on the Fed's commentary. Like we could see the Fed do a rate cut in March and then Powell come out and say something like, this is going to be the only one for the year. And then we could actually see interest rates get worse in reacting to his commentary.
Mhm.
So my personal opinion is we've already seen the benefit of those 3 rate cuts in our current pricing.
Mhm.
Do you guys think we'll see more if they actually do it?
I think we'll see a little bit. And I think the people that aren't engaged with us and are waiting, trying to time it, are going to miss out on those opportunities, or they're going to be upset and they're going to say, well, the news said this. Well, that happened 3 months ago because, as you're saying, we react before the announcement actually hits. So that's the tricky part.
Yeah, I think inflation too is going to have a big impact on rates. Just what we see for those numbers coming out, because we've seen them improve, but I mean, if they continue to improve, great for interest rates. If we go into a recession or they call it a recession officially, that probably will help us too.
That's a good point to lead into how interest rate pricing actually works. So the reason that markets often, interest rates really do well in times where it seems like it's bad news, like if you think about during the pandemic, right? That was great for interest rates. And it wasn't only because of the Fed taking rates down. So like Sandy explained, the Fed funds rate is not mortgage interest rates, but they react to each other. And so the Fed funds rate is what affects like short-term debts, like credit cards, HELOCs, those short-term lending options. Then other factors that are impacting mortgage interest rates are the supply of mortgage bonds. So when times are tough, so in a recession, investors look to more secure bonds. Mortgage bonds are a government bond that the government hasn't, although it's been highly dramatized, defaulted on their debt ever. So it's a safe place for investors to go in times of uncertainty. And when the demand for mortgage bonds is high, interest rates go down.
Mhm.
I keep looking at Sandy because she just completed a course on this. Like she just got her certification to be an expert on bonds and the market and interest rates. What's it called? Certified mortgage advisor.
Mhm.
So I'm like, if I say something wrong, she's going to call me on it. So I'm like, is that right? Is it?
You're doing great.
So if the demand for mortgage bonds is high, that typically coincides with economic uncertainty, like a recession or a war, or way back in the beginning of my career, we were like, we just need one more case of Ebola and then we could lock this rate. So it's horrible because in this real estate space, bad news is good news. Interest rate pricing will also move with the markets based on news and the reaction to it. So if the Fed does come out and reduce rates and interest rates, it in 2024, it could be more than 3 times. It could be less than 3 times. What's important for everyone on this call to know is that the market has already reacted to 3 rate cuts. Then as there's less uncertainty on where investors should put their money, we could see interest rates improve even more because right now they say there's about 300 basis points of fear built into the rate. So based on the actual supply of bonds and the actual metrics, our interest rates should already be in the fives, but there's a lot of fear built into the pricing.
Yep, uncertainty about what's going to happen. And it's really interesting like learning about how investors put out their rate sheets, because there's a lot of risk in being an investor that puts away your money for that long of a time period,
Mhm.
because if rates get worse or better, that impacts how valuable the asset that you just purchased is. How valuable, because you lent the money and now you're making this return. But if when returns increase or decrease, your investment's now better or worse. So it's really interesting how many factors go into interest rate pricing as far as mortgages and what, right? Because you have the Fed funds rate and then you have all these other, factors impacting mortgage interest rates. So it's important to, stay on these webinars and stay up to date. And we're constantly reading all the news to, keep you informed and make the best, decisions.
The interesting thing about what Sandy's saying right now is when Sandy says it's interesting to learn about these things, she actually thinks it's interesting. Like I just do it because I have to. Like it's very important to
Same.
my job for me to know this.
If I'm not educated,
Sandy's
I can't help.
actually like feeling her soul light up as she learns these things.
Yeah.
Look at her blushing.
Okay. Why didn't we always use temporary buy downs? So as I started at the beginning of this webinar, I was like, there's so many things that we started doing in 2023 that I'm like, why didn't we always do this? And I've said so many times this year, like, why didn't we always use temporary buy downs? This is the most magical program. I think it's amazing. If you are new on this call or you haven't heard us explain it before, you've always had questions about it. The way it works is the seller contributes a lump sum of money that's used to help you subsidize your payment for the first few years. It could be 1 year, it could be 2 years, it could be 3 years, but basically what's happening is the seller's helping you make your mortgage payment. You're taking out a 30-year fixed at the market rate. That's how it's amortizing. That's the loan you're getting, but the seller's helping you make your payments for the first few years. Well, it took me all of 2023 harping about why didn't we always do this until these two looked at me and they're like, because the seller wasn't going to give you shit before.
You couldn't squeeze the seller like you did in 2023. So
Mhm.
maybe you got 5,000-10,000 max, at least here in Washoe County. I never saw someone willing to go 15 or go above that 3%. It was unheard of. So
We got seller concessions at like $30,000-$40,000 this year or last year, I should say. So I think that whether or not we continue to see those programs is just going to be a product of how low interest rates go and how much inventory gets freed up. To answer the question that started this whole rant, but also tied into my part of the forecast, will we see more inventory? I think we'll see some inventory get unlocked by sellers' golden handcuffs being removed. New housing starts, I don't think we'll see the same deals from them that we saw this year because builders, I should say, new housing starts are way lower. They're down. And builders had this inventory that they were eager to move in 2023. I'll be watching very closely to see if builders keep going with the same incentives in the new year because there shouldn't be the same amount of construction hitting if we look at the new housing start numbers. They're down. So some inventory unlocked by sellers being able to move and not being scared of an 8% interest rate. 5% looks a lot better when you've seen 8. And then I think pretty much status quo on new builds, maybe less deals from them.
Yeah, I already heard of one builder here locally ending they were doing 3-2-1 with a killer starting rate that they had bought down, and that's over as of the end of December. So they're already, which I mean makes sense. They were eating it on those mortgages. So now that rates are naturally lower, they're not going to spend so much on
They
that.
won't
Like you
need to
said, they
do it
don't
to move it.
have as much excess inventory they need to push.
or there's going to be time crunch with those incentives too, where your transaction has to close by X date.
That's
because
a
it's
really
just
good
too
point.
expensive.
Because
So-
they bought a forward lock. They bought
Mhm.
a lump sum of mortgages at that reduced interest rate. This is really important for people because we get this question all the time. How does a builder offer an insanely low interest rate? Often they own the mortgage company too, so they have the profit margins and they use those margins to buy a lump sum of mortgages where upfront they pay down to get you a better interest rate. And those had to close by a certain date. So then whether or not they choose to invest their capital in buying another forward lock on a lump sum of mortgages, we'll see. Quick pause right now, you guys. if this is bringing you value, if you're interested in what we're talking about, you don't have to wait for the monthly webinar. We talk about this stuff on our social media every day. All three of us show up a lot on Instagram, on our stories. We post reels. We try to keep you informed, educated, and entertained. So if you're not already, please follow us on Instagram and we'll stay in touch with you all month long.
Puppies and babies you can also expect to see.
There's a lot
They're
of
the best.
there's a lot of babies.
I don't have either, but I'll provide
Aw.
videos
She
in my
dances.
pajamas.
So
If you make it onto her close friends list, you'll get some fun surprises.
Okay, let's talk about that.
anyway, we're also here to talk about what you're all probably thinking about, tax season. So tax season is upon us. And if you're self-employed, you want to listen up and you want to make
Look alive
sure
right now.
that you contact us so we can basically do a pre-audit before you go talk to your CPA or your tax preparer. Because how many times have you had a client come in that wrote everything off and then you're like, yeah, you don't make $15,000 a month. You make $1,500. And they look at you like, are you shitting me?
Mhm.
Like, there's no way. What do you mean? And you're like, well, let's take a look at your Schedule C or your tax returns. Like, let's take a look. You wrote off everything. So if you are self-employed and you're thinking about buying in the next couple of years, you need to come talk to us so that we can really take a look at your finances and let you know what you need to be claiming in income so that you can qualify for what you're looking for, because there are different programs for self-employed borrowers, but we've seen those do have higher interest rates. They have a little bit more restrictions with needing higher down payments and things like that. So it is doable, but if we can clean things up and guide you to success to also translate that information to your CPA, you're going to be a lot happier. And also for people that do have to pay the IRS and have payments, we need to make sure that they dial in that payment plan, because if they don't, that can be an issue, and make sure that you're making those payments on time, because we are going to ask about it. Because when we look at your tax returns and we show that you owe money, we're going to most likely need that to be paid in full before you close, or we're going to need that IRS payment plan dialed in. And then next, there are some people that are very fortunate that get actual tax returns, and they get tax returns, get tax refunds. So for those of you lucky ones that do get refunds, we want to make sure we're even more strategic now, because we want our money to make us money. So if you're short on cash to close, or sometimes people ask us, should they be paying off their debt, or should they use that money towards a down payment? This is where I know we like to look and analyze and take a look. Does it make sense to pay off debt? Will they qualify for more? Or let's apply that to the down payment, because then they can qualify for X house. Now, if they're not looking at buying immediately, we should really be advising clients to put it in a short-term CD and invest their money into a high yield savings account, because we want our money to make money while we're sleeping. Because that's when we're
And
gonna
rates
keep
are, the
improving.
Fed funds rate hasn't been cut yet. So
Yeah,
savings
so if
account
you
rates
have
are
money right
good.
now, put it into a high yield savings account if you haven't yet.
You can even get a short-term CD with a really good rate. Like you can only lock it up for 3 months or 12 months.
Yeah, depending
and
on the
get, like,
bank.
4 to 5%.
Mhm.
With the tax returns, we totally get it, right? That you don't
Yeah,
want
we
to
wanna
bend over
save
for
money.
the IRS, and we want you to also achieve your goal of homeownership. Like I think the American dream is to purchase a home and live tax-free. Like
Yeah,
I think that it's both of those
but
things.
you got to pay to play. Unfortunately, you have to.
The year you want to buy a house, you have to strategically file your taxes, and you can't write everything off. There's a lot of deductions that we can add back in, and we will work with you on it. But as Nayeli's saying, it is so much easier to work with you before the return's filed. If we can review a draft of it and put together a plan, and we
Mhm.
can work with your CPA. It's not us against them.
Yeah,
It's
we're
all on your
constantly
team.
calling. Like, I have some tax preparers where I call them and I'm like, hey, just want to talk about this client's file real quick.
What's the
They
strategy?
addressed these concerns. They just bought a rental. Make sure that you include that rental in, because if they try to purchase another property in the next year and I can't show a history of that rental income, that's also going to really hurt them in their qualifications. So
It's just nice if your whole team works together, and it's timely to get on the same page with that right now.
Yeah. And shameless plug that it's never too early to start the conversation about your pre-approval. I mean, even if you're years out, I mean, most people on this call are 1 to 2 years out, but even longer than that, like if you have questions, it's never too early to just start the conversation and so we can have a feel for your goals and what the long-term strategy would look like.
We like long-term.
Yep.
The more time we have to prepare, the better.
It's a lot easier on you too. There's less stuff that we're hassling you for, and it's gonna be a lot smoother of a process because you know what to expect.
One thing we're keeping from the webinar before is the success story, because it's always fun to share with you guys how we've seen clients win and do things they didn't think they could do. And Nayeli had clients who had a big win in 2023.
Yes. So these clients are just fabulous. They are actually self-employed. They own an electric company in town and they just started their business 3 years ago. And he called me right when he started his business and he said, I'm ready to purchase a property. I said, great, let's talk about your employment history. Well, I just started my company. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's not great. That's great news. I'm so excited for you. But I need at least a 12 full months because he was a journeyman before. But with his scenario, we really needed 2 years of him having his own company. Well, now
To be profitable and
for
all
it to
that.
be profitable and show, because we look at the 2 most recent years of their lives. So now year 3 in the business, year 3, they acquired 2 rental properties. So we closed on his first property in January and then closed on his second property last week. So he bought a condo and he bought a single family residence. The location is amazing for both properties. What was really nice about him is that he was a little bit scared about interest rates being a little bit higher, but he knew this was the time to act on now because if he waited for things to cool down, he wasn't going to be able to really squeeze the seller to pay for those repairs. There was a huge roof repair that was paid for by the seller on the property that we just
That's
closed for
wild.
last week. Over $2,000 in repairs paid by the seller. He got 2% on both deals for seller credit. So all of his closing costs were paid for, repairs were done, and his agent was able to negotiate the purchase price down 15,000 on the first house and 25,000 on the house that we closed on last week. So he hit the lottery and he's super excited and he's like, okay, when can we do it again? And I'm like, well, whenever you're ready, I'm ready.
I've been thinking
But
a lot about this. Like clients who tie their money up in real estate. I mean, obviously we're adamant about real estate and it's where I invest a lot of money because I feel comfortable. It's what I do. I'm an expert at this. I like real estate. But the other thing I realized I liked about real estate was I was just reading a study about how people have blasted through all their money. Like people, especially millennials, and I'm an elder millennial, believe it or not. And they have spent all their money on the wrong things. And that's not the point of this. I'm never here to shame people for buying their lattes or whatever. But I took all this money that I had and I tied it up in real estate. And then I felt poor in 2023. But it was great because I couldn't touch any of my money. It was locked up in these assets. And now I have cash flow. So one strategy I think that people overlook with real estate is it's an investment and it's going to earn you appreciation. It's going to earn you amortization. If it's rented out, it's going to also earn you monthly cash flow. It also saves you from spending your money on stupid shit. Who's talking about the digital cleanup? We're all looking at you.
I'm talking about it. Okay. So actually, I just started doing this because I listened to the Ed Milet podcast today, which you all should listen to. It's How to Build Your Wealth in 2024. And basically, it was talking about what we were going to talk about today is just going through and actually looking at what to utilize, what you don't. I'm actually calling Charter after this or Spectrum, whatever they're called, because I pay for cable, but I don't watch any of it. So that's immediately going to save me $60. So now is the time also just to look.
And Charter's evil. Get rid of them.
They're terrible, but like they're a monopoly. So here we are. Anyways, now is the time. Like, I don't know if you guys have been doing this. I know we all talked about it, but cleaning out your files, like what doesn't need to be here anymore? How can we better organize ourselves to things that are still relevant and that we need to be using and access? Maybe you need to update your trust if you do have a trust, like update accounts, put things into the trust. Now is the time to do it. And also unsubscribe from all the stuff that you don't use. If you pay for a gym membership and you don't go, you should go. But if you don't, cancel it. Who cares if you don't? Like,
We're not
just-
here to judge you.
Yeah, I mean, I have one and I don't use it. So
Go
not,
for a walk outside.
yeah, we're doing more walks, but just declutter and organize and just do a self audit of what is useful and what is costing me money that I can then put into my high yield savings account or put towards that future investment property.
And back up all your stuff. And if you have the ability, like if you have accounts and nobody knows how to log into them. You might think you're protected by your will or your trust. I've talked about this in the past, but I'm super passionate about it. We just built a spreadsheet out of all our accounts, where all the assets sit, the logins, the usernames. And then if you can download Loom, it's an extension of your browser. You can record a video where you walk your loved ones through, here's where I keep my crypto, here's how you log in. This is where my retirement is. This is how you log into my checking. This is how you pay the mortgage for this property. Save that on a flash drive and throw it in your safe. If anything happens to you, God forbid, but the last thing you want is people waiting for the judge to act on your trust and carry out your wishes, and people being stressed out in the meantime. So I think it's a great time to do a digital cleanup, from everything as little as unsubscribing to newsletters you don't read or memberships you don't use, to backing up your pictures and your photos, to thinking about your finances on a more serious level.
So go ahead.
Yeah, and if you're not setting up a trust tomorrow, you can contact your bank and set a beneficiary to all your
Mhm.
accounts. So that's free. You can just go to your bank, and then if something were to happen to you, it would be transferred to you. Like the loved one that you have designated would have access to that. So that can happen with, so do that with your assets too, so that it's not locked up.
Yeah, because people are going to need that money to take care of your bills and stuff. And that's it, you guys. I have no idea what time it is because I can't see the time. So I don't know if we went really long or really short, or where are we,
About
Michelle?
31 minutes.
I also can't see the time.
Well,
We're right on time. It's
Oh,
12:33.
perfect.
perfect, you guys.
But we took one question in
Hey.
the chat I want to address. Let's see, somebody said, say the name of the Zoom recorder again.
Oh, Loom.
Loom. It's an extension you can download in Chrome, or you can download the app to your desktop, and then you can use more of its functions.
Mhm.
LOOM. L as in Larry. Loom.
That's it.
Perfect.
If you need one-on-one advice, or you don't want to raise your hand and ask a question right now, or you'd like to sit down and strategize with us and pick our brains. Ooh, I hate that. Why did I just say that? I hate pick your brain. Anyways, we would love to help you on a more one-on-one level. You don't have to wait for the next call. Use that QR code to scan and make an appointment with us. We'll talk to you guys next month. Thanks for being here.
Have a great month. Happy New Year.